Hello all, welcome to today's presentation. So today we will be presenting our Capstone project, which we have done on the Airbnb bookings analysis. It was done by my team, which of course included me, Siddharth Pasayat, and my fellow teammate Pankaj Bildar. We both are a data science trainee from AlmaBetter, Bengaluru, India. And now let's have a brief introduction about what Airbnb is and what it is being doing, because we'll be dealing definitely with its data set. So Airbnb, as in Air, Bed and Breakfast, is a service which allows the property owners to rent out their spaces, condos to travelers looking for a place to stay. So this gives a very human experience to those travelers, as you can, choose to select a host of properties and, interesting places where you can share your experiences with strangers who list those properties. And this is not something which is being new. This is being done through centuries, but with the presence of digital internet and the digital gizmos, I think it has just scaled the business and made it a lot more safer and easier to trust to. Airbnb was started in 2008 by Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia, based in San Francisco, California. And I think it has a very simple idea where, localites or the locals, they can, earn some extra money by renting out their extra spaces or condos to people who are, looking to visit that area. And this platform is accessible via website and mobile app. The key takeaways are this platform, it works on this peer-to-peer economy model, and it allows a host of customization to, enhancing and elevating the experience of the travelers visiting those localities and areas. The problem statement which we have in front of us is quite clear. Since 2008, guests and hosts, they have used Airbnb to expand on traveling possibilities and present a much more unique, personalized way of experiencing the world. The one which we're talking about, the human touch, because that's also the tagline of Airbnb, travel like a human. Now, these millions of listings generate a lot of data that can be analyzed and used for security, business decisions, understanding of customers, and the host's behavior and performance on this platform, guiding and rolling down new marketing initiatives, implementation of any additional services, if any, right? So the key takeaways for us will be to understand the customer and the host's behavior, to be in a position where we can roll down interesting and exciting marketing initiatives and additional services if needed. Now what we have in front of us is the data set, which has roughly 48,895 rows and 16 features or columns. Now this data sets, they have certain columns like ID, which means or represents unique listing ID, name, which represents accommodation, host ID, which represents unique ID for host, host name, which represents registered name for host, price, which represents price of listing, room types, it represents 3 unique rooms which Airbnb provides, like the entire home or apartment, private rooms or shared rooms. Neighborhood group is a group of area. Neighborhood is the area under neighborhood group. It's basically like district and cities. Latitude and longitude, it refers to the coordinates of those localities. Minimum nights, it refers to the mandatory stays which is allowed or required for a single visit. And number of reviews is a total rating count of the listings. Last reviews, where it was given, calculated host listing counts, the total number of listings registered by or under the hosts. And reviews per month is the ratings received per month, and availability 365 is the number of days for which the host is available to list their properties throughout a year. Now, while dealing with those data set and doing some data wrangling, we found out that there were some null values or the missing values in certain features or columns. Like name, it has 16, host name, it has 21, last reviews it has, and the reviews per month it has roughly 10,000. So what we did, we tried to fill it up with 0 so that we can have a complete data set with certain values, but not definitely the missing values. So now what we have in front of us is the New York City map, which is at the second map, as you can see, the second image, to be much more precise. And the first one we did is a scatter plot of the latitude and longitude or the coordinates that was provided in the data set. And we can see both of these are very, very much identical, giving us a sense that whatever information we have is all accurate and we can move ahead with that, right? So as you can see, definitely you can get a sense of the location of various neighborhood, demographic distributions, and area-wise presence. Like you can see, the Bronx and the Manhattans are taking care of the northern part, Staten Island is in southern, here Queens is much more on the eastern side, and Brooklyn is much more on the centrally located place, right? Now, before moving on to the exploratory data analysis, I think we have to lay down certain objectives in front of us so that at the end of it, we are in a capacity to answer those questions and take away and have important key takeaways, right? So the first is, which is the preferred location according to the average best price? Where are the most hosts located, the highest and the lowest renting or the rent paying locations by the customers? Most popular and the demanded hosts based on reviews and availability 365 days, establishing a relation between neighborhood groups and the availability of rooms. Who are the top host neighborhood groups based on the turnover, room type selection based on the price, availability of 360 on the 365 days, top 10 neighborhood based on median listing of the prices, distribution of properties based on mandatory stays, types of visit based on mandatory stays allowed for a single booking, so on and so forth. So key takeaways here will be to understand the customers and the host's behavior, and then be in a position where we can definitely roll down marketing initiatives and additional services. So coming on to our first objective, we have to identify which is the preferred location according to the average best price. The first thing here, we have plotted four various graphs consisting of bar plots, box plots, and histograms. So they give us a sense of idea, of how our neighborhood or the locality is, varying with respect to price, with respect to frequency, with respect to the room types, neighborhoods, all those things. And from there, we get a sense of idea that Manhattan is the preferred location based on pricing and frequency of the customer visit. It is preferred in all types of rooms. The prices on Manhattans are mostly on the higher ends. As you can see, it's quite evident in the graphs, and entire home and apartment take the major chunk in this portion or the proportion in Manhattan. And in Brooklyn, it is the lion's share is of the private rooms. And if we talk about shared rooms, in the last graph you can see, the fourth graph you can see, there's a small peak, and that peak is by Manhattan. The shared rooms are higher in Manhattan. So what we get an overall idea is that it's Manhattan all the way in terms of locality, in terms of pricing, in terms of customer visit, and mostly the high-end properties. Now the question comes up or pops up, why Manhattan? Right, so we have plotted a scatter plot based on the latitude and longitude, based on certain pricings and the room types. And from there, we get a sense that the southern Manhattan and the northern Brooklyn mostly has the high-end and expensive properties. Manhattan has the maximum number of high-price regions, making it obviously one of the posh areas of the New York City. Private rooms and apartments are mostly preferred by customers over shared. And that's for obvious reasons, and if you see the present scenario also, it's quite safer and hygienic also, right? Because you don't want to share that common sharing space. Manhattan also has the highest private and entire apartment rooms in combination, followed by Brooklyn. So Manhattan and Brooklyn, these two, which seems to be much more elitist and posh localities. Now coming on to the correlation matrix. Correlation matrix, here it was done just to basically identify the correlation between certain features and give us a better understanding in evaluating our objectives. So the takeaways are, we find high correlation number between the number of reviews and the reviews per month, which is roughly around 0.59, and a very low correlation number, which translates to poor correlation between host ID and minimum nights to minus 0.019. Okay. So now coming on to the next objective, where we have to identify the highest and the lowest property prices and their locations. So after group buying and identifying those features like location, maximum price, and minimum price, we came to suggestion, or we came to a conclusion that customers pay highest tariff of $10,000 in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and Queens. So that's quite evident from the first bar plot graph. And customers pay lowest tariffs of $10 in your Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and Bronx. So that's quite evident from the second bar plot graph, right? So what you can have a sense of idea that especially the Brooklyn and Manhattan, they have a wide range. They have a wide range of properties listed, which starts from the lowest tariff of $10 to the maximum price of $10,000. That means it caters to the needs of a wide range of visits or customers or guest requirements. Coming on to the next objective, which is about the most popular hosts based on reviews and availability. So definitely we grouped by the calculated host listing counts and number of reviews and host name, and we sorted it according to the calculated host listing count, and from there what we get a sense of idea that Sonder, Blueground, Kara, Kazuya, Jeremy and Laura, these are some of the most popular hosts, based on the categories or the features we have considered. Now moving on to the next objective, where we have to establish a relation between neighborhood groups and the availability of rooms. So we did do a box plot based on the availability and the neighborhood, and the takeaways were Staten Island has the highest availability of rooms over 365 days, followed by Bronx. Now Brooklyn and Manhattan seems to be very much occupied during those seasons because so the availability is not that frequent, because these are very posh localities where the operational, the maintenance, all these costs are very high, and usually it attracts very high-end clients also who prefer to stay for longer period. That's what is a sense we are able to get from these kind of relations that's established. And Staten Island and Bronx being on the outskirt of these localities, they are readily available. So it's very apt for students and people from low income groups to go for a quick visit and get rooms as per their requirements. Moving on to the next objective, where we have to identify the top host's neighborhood based on that possible turnover generated. That's based on the properties they have listed, right? So from the very first bar plot, we get a sense of the top 5 hosts based on the possible turnover generated, and they are Sonder, Blueground, Sally, Red, Awning, and Kara, right? So here also somehow we are seeing the name of Sonder and Blueground. So these names popped up based on the calculated host listing counts and reviews. So generally from these two analysis, we can very much assure that our most valuable and star hosts are Sonder and Blueground. And if you see the top 5 neighborhood, which we have plotted in the second graph, so Financial District tops in the terms of the possible turnover generated, and definitely Financial District is the buzz of Manhattan. It's a district where it attracts a lot of footfall, right? So definitely the properties which are listed over here will be of wide range, and the possible turnover generated will be very much high, right? That also reassures that we are dealing and drawing our analysis in the right direction. The next objective is about room type selection based on prices. So here we have plotted various graphs from bar plots to pie charts and certain distributions, where we get a sense that shared rooms are available for most of the times as compared to private and entire home apartment. In terms of availability, they are readily available, and the room type distribution has some other picture to say. The entire home and apartment has 52% of the chunk, followed by private room, which is 45.7%, and a very meager share of shared room, that is 2.4%. And from the very third graph, we can see that the price of entire home apartment is usually higher as compared to the private rooms and shared ones throughout the localities and the neighborhoods, right? Okay. So continuing with that analysis, in the first graph, it's quite evident that Manhattan and Brooklyn are the posh areas with high-end properties available. Whether it's private rooms or the entire home apartment, they take a lion's share in this, price race, right? And the high-end properties are mostly the entire home and apartment. That is also evident from another scatter plot which we have plotted, and it's there below, right? As you can see, all the distribution of all the room types for the following neighborhood groups, and you can see mostly it's the orange color which depicts the entire home and apartment. That means these are mostly the properties which are scattered all over the area, especially in the high-end price range. Coming on to the next objective, where we need to identify the top neighborhoods based on listing price. Specifically, it's the median listing price. So here we get a sense of the Fort Wordsworth and Woodrow. These are the top neighborhood based on the listing price by a huge margin than their contemporaries. Now, median is very different from mean, right? Mean is somewhere the average. Median is if you are having 10 listed properties and you arrange it according to their ascending order in terms of prices, what will be the middle value will give you a sense of the median, right? So here it gives us a sense that maybe in the Staten Island, which is the neighborhood group of Fort Wordsworth and Woodrow, they don't have much properties, right? It's quite evident from even this graph, right? As you can see in Staten Island, if you see, as compared to Manhattan, which has the financial district, right? So they have a lot of properties, but here the number of properties are very less. So when you're rearranging in terms of your, sorting in terms of your prices, right? in the ascending order, and then you are finding the somewhere the middle value. So it's obvious that the properties which have, or the neighborhood which have lesser counts or lesser number of listed properties might shoot up in terms of median thing. This also gives us a very different perspective and understanding about these localities, right? Okay. Now moving on to the next objective, which is about distribution of neighborhood based on mandatory stays allowed for a single booking. Now, this is a very crucial factor which we have come across, while analyzing this data. Not everyone is open for a single day booking and all. So there are a whole lot of hosts who allows a minimum certain number of days for a single booking. So based on that, what we have done, we have segregated the neighborhoods based on the average, the minimum days they are allowing, right? So most hosts, they allow mandatory stay for less than 5 days. As you can see, most hosts who are present in, these areas like Bronx and Staten Island, they allow a mandatory stay for less than 5 days. But Manhattan has a higher requirement for mandatory stay, followed by Brooklyn and Queens. So all these three are much more than the 5 days mark. And customers from the second scatter plot we can evidently see that customers, they prefer to stay in places where mandatory stay is minimum and it's quite budget friendly. Manhattan has a highest range of offerings, both in terms of higher mandatory stays and expensive listed properties. So so the overall trip might turn out to be expensive on an average. Now, coming on to our very last objective, which is we segregated the types of visit based on the mandatory stays allowed for a single booking. So what we did was, based on this mean or the average minimum days of the bookings allowed during a single visit, we have segregated into short-term visit up to 5 days, mid-term visit up to 90 days, followed by long-term visit more than 90 days. And with this graph, it's quite evident that on the basis of the hosts which allowing minimum mandatory stay, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn hosts, they prefer customers having a minimum of a midterm visit, right? From midterm visit to, as per your preferences, you can go. We're not allowing any short-term visit, anything less than five days on an average. It's not that all the hosts, but on an average, if you see, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn hosts, they prefer customers who are ready or willing to stay for more than 5 days. And Bronx and Staten Island, they prefer customers for all sort of stays, right? From short-term, mid-term onwards, right? From short-term onwards. So there is no restriction as per that, right? Bronx and Staten Island can be preferred for shorter stays over other neighborhoods, making it budget-friendly to some extent. And Manhattan and Brooklyn, being the posh areas, the lightest areas, and the implementation of these higher mandatory stays for single booking will make these trips and visits often expensive. So now coming to the limitations and the scope of improvement, definitely there was a lot of limitations while dealing with the analysis of these data set, and there are certain scopes where things can be improved. So the first thing was data sets. They have limiting attributes to classify various categories of properties. Customers' experiential and category-wise ratings for hosts seemed to be missing, which could have played a very crucial role in identifying star hosts. Based on their experiences. A lot of guest informations were missing, like the purpose of visit, number of guests, which could have been given a sense of understanding about the relation of customer footfall in neighborhoods. And key attributes of properties like number of beds, closets, bathrooms, gym, sauna, property age, distances from nearest hospitals, shopping complexes, airport stations were also missing. So the final takeaways will be the key attributes related to property, related to the customer's experiences with hosts, and related to the guest details could have given us more insight into the analysis. Now coming to the conclusion, after what all we have analyzed and gone through it, so there is a host of conclusions that we can draw from it and can definitely push for some new initiatives to roll on. So the first takeaways will be that Manhattan and Brooklyn, these are the posh areas. These are the elitist areas of the New York City, having high-end homes and a maximum number of hosts renting out spaces or listing out their properties. Staten Island, it seems more available for booking throughout the area, being located a little outskirt to these posh localities, and not much, financial buzz around there. So I think these are some of the localities which are available for booking throughout the year. Sonder and Blue Ground, it seems to be the most popular hosts in terms of reviews received properties listed, and the possible turnover generated. Financial district, which is the buzz of Manhattan, has high turnover from the properties listed, the high possible turnover. And Staten Island, though, has very fewer properties, but the median listing price is more in its neighborhood of Fort Wordsworth and Woodrow. And lastly, but not the least, most hosts, they allow less than 5 days mandatory stay, but this average is a little higher, on the higher side, in case of your Manhattan, followed by Brooklyn and Queens. So I think with all these analysis, we got a very good sense of idea, and the relations, certain relations were established, which will help us in identifying the key areas where we can implement and initiate new market initiatives and roll on some additional services. So coming on to our next thing, which is the marketing initiative, based on our analysis. Manhattan, being the star neighborhood, we can roll down a lot of festive offers, encouraging longer stays during Christmas. Longer stays translates to good business, and coming up with loyalty cards for frequent visitors, which can also work for areas like Brooklyn and Queens. The star hosts should be also incentivized to encourage them to maintain the properties and services as per the company standards, so pushing our business always higher. Followed by Staten Island and Bronx. Now these can have discounts where it can encourage students to stay for longer period, because they have shared rooms, they have availability throughout the year. So that can encourage students to stay for longer period in these places, or frequent visiting these places. It can also have frequent check-in cards for people from low income groups visiting regularly, by offering good incentives and coupons. And last but not the least, some local tours, right, based on the localities, can be clubbed during longer visits, encouraging customers to stay longer and prefer their stays, and making their stays, more like a human touch. It's like giving a more human touch, I think, which Airbnb completely believes in, especially with the tagline, it's travel like a human, right? So the key takeaways will be the festive offers and the loyalty cards, discounts and frequent check-in cards, incentivizing the host, and local tours and experiences. And I think with this, we have come up to the end of our presentation. I think we have got a whole lot of ideas, right? Evaluating and re-evaluating a lot of informations, data and features, coming up with interesting relations, and and rolling down some new exciting initiatives, which will definitely push the business notch higher. So I would request all of you, so choose Airbnb and travel like a human. That's all from my end. Thank you.